Sir, I need you to leave. Right now. This section is reserved for active service personnel and their immediate families during interment ceremonies. You don't have authorization to be standing here. The voice sliced through the quiet of the cemetery like a blade through still water. Sharp, clipped. Laced with the unearned confidence of a man who had never once considered the possibility that he might be wrong. Derek Calloway, 26 years old, a newly appointed cemetery administrative supervisor with a laminated badge clipped to his pressed khaki shirt and a clipboard tucked under his arm like a weapon, stood at the edge of Section G with his shoulders squared and his jaw set. He was not unkind. Exactly. He was something more dangerous than unkind. He was certain. The man he was addressing did not move. His name was Earl Gideon, and he was 83 years old. He stood beside a white marble headstone in the third row of Section G, the same spot he had stood every Tuesday morning for 22 years. He wore a faded canvas jacket the color of old moss, soft at the elbows and frayed at the cuffs in a way that spoke of decades of honest use rather than neglect. Beneath it was a plain gray flannel shirt, buttoned to the collar. His jeans were worn at the knees. His boots were old but polished. His white hair moved slightly in the October wind, and his hands, mapworks of wrinkles and liver spots, knuckles like river stones worn smooth by decades of current, rested quietly at his sides. Perfectly steady, he had a small bundle of wildflowers in his left hand, the stems wrapped in a damp paper towel, the way a man wraps flowers when he has been doing it for 22 years and knows exactly how long they need to stay fresh. He did not look up. Derek Calloway stepped closer. Behind him, 3 junior groundskeepers paused their work on the far side of the row, leaning on their equipment and watching. A family of 4 had arrived for a burial in the adjacent section and stood near their black sedan, watching too, uncertain whether to approach. A young sergeant from the Honor Guard, the 6-man ceremonial unit stationed at parade rest 50 yards away for the morning's interment, had gone still at his post. His name was Marcus Webb, and he was watching with an expression that had changed in the last 30 seconds from professional detachment to something quieter and harder. Sir, Calloway's voice climbed a register. I'm going to have to ask you one more time. Earl Gideon raised his eyes then. They were pale blue, the precise color of a winter sky in the hour before dawn, and they possessed a depth that seemed to absorb the light rather than reflect it. He looked at Derek Calloway the way a very old river looks at a stone thrown into it, without urgency, without alarm, already knowing the stone will sink and the river will continue. I come every Tuesday, Earl said. His voice was a low, unhurried rasp, the kind that had long since stopped caring whether it was heard over the noise of the room. Have for 22 years. Nobody's moved me yet. Calloway's jaw tightened. He shifted his clipboard to his other arm and glanced back at the groundskeepers, then at the family by the sedan, then squared himself again. He had an audience. He would not back down in front of an audience. With all due respect, sir, that doesn't change the regulation. During active interment services, this section is restricted. I don't know who let you in here before, but that's not going to be how we run things going forward. Now, if you'd like to come back after 11 when the service is concluded, I'll be gone by 10, Earl said. I always am. Sir, the boy in this stone, Earl said, and he touched the top of the marble headstone with 2 fingers. The way you touch something precious and familiar, was 20 years old when they put him in this ground. I was 21. I'd like to finish what I came to say to him. A beat of silence settled over Section G. The wind moved through the rows of white stones, and somewhere in the middle distance a flag snapped against its pole with a sound like a rifle shot. The October grass was impossibly green, manicured to a uniform height, the kind of perfection that spoke of relentless care. The air smelled of dew and cut grass and cold stone, and beneath that something older, the particular mineral silence of a place where grief has accumulated for generations. Derek Calloway did not register any of this. He was 26, and he had a regulation, and he had an audience, and those three facts were the entire architecture of his world in this moment. Sir, I understand this is emotional. I really do. But I cannot make exceptions. The rules exist for a reason, and if I let one person, you wouldn't be making an exception, Earl said quietly. He was already looking back at the stone. You'd be leaving an old man alone with his friend for 20 minutes. Those are different things. Something moved through the groundskeepers, a collective flinch, a dropping of eyes, a sudden intense interest in the handles of their equipment. Sergeant Marcus Webb, 50 yards away, exhaled slowly through his nose. The family by the sedan had stopped pretending not to watch. Calloway felt the shift and did not like it. He had been hired 3 months ago and had worked very hard in those 3 months to establish that he was serious, that he ran a tight operation, that the cemetery's regulations existed and would be enforced. He had dealt with emotional visitors before. He had been trained for emotional visitors. The training said, be firm, be compassionate, be consistent. It did not say, look at the man's hands, or listen to the way he says the word friend. I'm going to need you to step away from the headstone, sir. Earl Gideon looked at him again. Just looked. And Calloway had the strange, unsettling sensation of being seen in a way he was not accustomed to being seen, not with judgment, not with anger, but with a kind of patient, exhausted recognition, as though the old man had met Derek Calloway before, in a dozen different forms, in a dozen different places, and had long since made his peace with it. Son, Earl said, very quietly, I've been asked to leave places before. Then you know how this works, Calloway said, and he reached out and put his hand on Earl Gideon's shoulder. The hand landed on the canvas jacket, and Earl Gideon went very still. And then, the cemetery dissolved. The jungle came back the way it always came back. Not gradually, not with warning, but all at once, like stepping through a door that was always there. The smell of cordite and rain-soaked earth replaced the dew and cut grass. The October quiet became the particular percussion of small arms fire in the middle distance, the rhythmic cough of mortars, the impossibly loud silence between. He was 21. His name was still Earl Gideon, but he weighed 40 pounds more, and his hair was black, and his hands, still steady, were pressed flat against the red mud of a road in Kong Tril Province. It was July of 1968, and the road was not safe, and he knew it was not safe, and he was on it anyway, because Danny Kowalski was on it, 70 yards back, and Danny Kowalski had been hit in the left thigh and was going to bleed out in the next 8 minutes if nobody carried him off that road. Earl did not think about this. He was already running. He reached Danny in the fire and got an arm under his shoulders and lifted him, and Danny made a sound that Earl had never been able to fully reconstruct in memory, something between a gasp and a prayer. And then they were moving. The weight was enormous. The road was mud and rubble. The fire was from the tree line to the left, and it was intermittent, but it was present, and it was looking for them. Earl's left boot found purchase, and his right boot found purchase, and he did not stop. He could feel Danny's blood soaking through his shirt, warm and terrifyingly fast. And Danny was talking, small broken sentences about a street in Hamtramck and a girl named Louise and a dog named Colonel. And Earl said, "Keep talking, Danny. Just keep talking," and kept moving. He carried him for 2 miles. He carried him off the road and through the secondary cover and to the landing zone where the medevac was waiting and screaming on the radio. And he handed Danny Kowalski to the medic at the door, and the medic said, "You made it. You made it." And the helicopter lifted away. And Earl sat down in the tall grass next to the L's and looked at his hands. They were covered in Danny's blood. They were perfectly steady. He found out 4 hours later that Danny had died on the helicopter. The femoral artery. It was always the femoral artery. He went back to the field. He did his job. He served for 11 more months, in 4 more provinces, with 3 more units, in ways that were never recorded anywhere he was ever asked about them. But on the 23rd of October, every year until October became a Tuesday, and after that every Tuesday without exception, he came to the stone with Daniel J. Kowalski carved into it, and he stood for 20 minutes, and he finished the conversations that had been interrupted by a medevac in Quang Tri province in July of 1968. He talked about Louise. He talked about Colonel the dog. He talked about the street in Hamtramck. He had never told anyone about the 2 miles. It was not a story he needed anyone else to carry. The October grass returned. The white stones in their perfect rows, the smell of dew and old marble. The hand was still on his shoulder. Earl Gideon looked at the hand, and then at the face of the young man who owned it, and he did not say anything. Sergeant Marcus Webb, 50 yards away, took off his white ceremonial glove. He had been watching since Calloway's voice first cut through the quiet. He had watched the escalation through 3 stages with the trained attention of a man who spent his professional life in ceremony, where every gesture carried weight and every breach of protocol was a visible wound. He had watched the old man's stillness, the way he had not flinched or argued or pleaded. He had watched the hand land on the canvas jacket, and something in his chest had tightened to the point of pain. He did not make a scene. He simply walked to the junior member of his honor guard detail, Specialist Olivia Crane, and said quietly, "I need you to cover my position for 5 minutes." She looked at him. She understood, somehow, that this was not a 5-minute thing. He walked to the administration building at the cemetery's entrance, found a quiet corner near the supply closet, and called Fort Belvoir's main operations number. The duty officer answered on the second ring with the flat, professional tone of someone who handles routine calls at this hour. "This is Sergeant Marcus Webb, Honor Guard, assigned to Arlington. I need to report a situation involving a visitor at Section G. His name is Earl Gideon." A pause. Not the administrative pause of someone pulling up a screen. A different kind of pause. The pause of a man who had just heard a name he was not expecting to hear on a Tuesday morning in October. "Say that again, Sergeant. Earl Gideon. He's at the Kowalski headstone in Section G. A cemetery administrator is attempting to remove him." The silence that followed stretched for 4 full seconds. When the duty officer spoke again, his voice had changed entirely, stripped of its professional flatness, carrying something that sounded like controlled alarm. "Don't let anyone touch him, Sergeant. Do you understand me? No one touches him. I'm making a call. Stay by your radio." The line did not go dead. Webb could hear, faintly, the sound of a chair scraping back, boots on a hard floor, a door, voices, at Fort Myer. A colonel named Haverford was in the middle of a quarterly budget review when his aide walked in without knocking. The aide's face said everything. Haverford had the handset to his ear before the aide finished speaking, and when he hung up, 45 seconds later, he was already on his feet pulling on his jacket. At the Pentagon, in an office on the E-Ring, a 3-star general named Patricia Delaney was reading a logistics summary when her phone rang. She picked it up. She heard a name. She put the logistics summary down very carefully, the way you put something down when your hands have suddenly lost the ability to grip. And she stood, and she said to no one in particular, "Get my car." Back in Section G, Derek Calloway did not know any of this. He knew only that the old man had stopped moving, and that the hand on his shoulder felt increasingly like the wrong move, and that the groundskeepers had gone completely still, and that the family by the sedan had stopped pretending to look anywhere else. "Sir, I'm going to have to insist." He did not finish the sentence, because Specialist Olivia Crane had stepped away from her position. And then Corporal James Rutherford had stepped away from his. And then the remaining 4 members of the Honor Guard detail had stepped away from theirs, and they were walking, not marching, not in formation, just walking with the particular deliberate calm of people who have made a decision. And they were placing themselves between Derek Calloway and the old man in the canvas jacket. They did not say anything. They simply stood. 6 people in immaculate dress blues, white gloves, polished shoes, forming a quiet semicircle around one 83-year-old man in worn jeans who was holding wildflowers and talking to a stone. Calloway stared, his clipboard lowered to his side. "You need to return to your positions," he said. His voice had lost some of its authority. "You're in violation of your duty assignment." Sergeant Webb, who had returned from the administration building without Calloway noticing, spoke from the edge of the semicircle. "Sir," he said, with a courtesy that was also, unmistakably, a wall, "we'll return to our positions when we're satisfied that the situation here is resolved appropriately. This isn't your business. With respect, sir," Webb said, "I believe it is." The silence stretched. The flag snapped in the wind. The family by the sedan had not moved in 2 minutes. The groundskeepers had set down their tools entirely. And then, sound came before sight, the way it always comes when something enormous is moving in your direction. A low, gathering rumble felt through the soles of boots. The distant wail of something official growing louder with a speed that meant whoever was driving was not observing posted speed limits. 3 vehicles appeared at the cemetery's main gate with that particular coordinated efficiency that speaks of practiced urgency. 2 black government-plated SUVs and a staff car, moving with the economy of motion of people who knew exactly where they were going and had cleared their calendars to get there. Doors opened before the vehicles fully stopped. General Patricia Delaney was 61 years old, with 38 years of service behind her and 3 stars on her shoulder, and she walked through the rows of white headstones with a purpose that did not acknowledge the presence of anyone between her and Section G, except the one person she had come to see. She did not look at Derek Calloway. She did not look at the family, or the groundskeepers, or the Honor Guard. Her eyes found Earl Gideon's canvas jacket in the 3rd row, and she walked toward it with measured, deliberate steps, and her polished boots on the October grass made the only sound in a suddenly very quiet world. She saw Calloway's hand, still half raised toward the old man's shoulder. Her eyes, briefly, found Calloway's face. He removed his hand as though the air around the old man had become very hot. General Delaney stopped 2 paces from Earl Gideon. She removed her service cap. She straightened to her full height, and she snapped to the sharpest, most breathtakingly precise salute that Derek Calloway had ever seen in his life. A salute of the kind you only give to someone who has earned something you know you never will. Directed at the old man with the wildflowers and the worn canvas jacket, and the pale blue eyes that looked at her now with something that was almost a smile. She held it. 1 second. 2, 3, 4. The family by the sedan had gone completely silent. The groundskeepers were not breathing. The honor guard, still in their semicircle, held themselves at rigid attention. Specialist Olivia Crane, 22 years old and 11 months into her service, felt something happen in her chest that she would not be able to name for several years and would spend the rest of her career trying to live up to. Earl Gideon raised his right hand, slowly, and returned the salute. General Delaney lowered her hand and turned to face the assembled witnesses, the family, the groundskeepers, the junior cemetery staff who had drifted over in the last 10 minutes, the honor guard, and Derek Calloway. And she spoke in a voice that carried across Section G with the clear, unhurried authority of someone who had addressed troops in 4 countries. My name is General Patricia Delaney. I'd like to tell you who this man is, if you'll allow me a few minutes. She produced a folded paper from her jacket pocket. She unfolded it. She read, Earl Raymond Gideon, Master Sergeant, United States Army Special Forces, retired, date of enlistment, June 1965. Date of separation, November 1978. 13 years of active service. Theaters of operation, Vietnam, 1966 through 1968, and again in 1970. He served in the 5th Special Forces Group, and later with MACSOG, Military Assistance Command Vietnam Studies and Observations Group, which is the name we gave our most elite covert operations unit in that theater because we could not call it what it was. She paused. Around the cemetery, the only sound was the wind. He holds the Bronze Star with Valor, the Silver Star, the Distinguished Service Cross, 4 Purple Hearts, and the Medal of Honor, awarded for actions on the 17th of July, 1968, in Công Tra Province, Republic of Vietnam, for carrying a wounded soldier named Private First Class Daniel J. Kowalski off an active fire road under sustained enemy contact, a distance of approximately 2 miles, in conditions that every subsequent assessment has described as not survivable. She folded the paper. She looked at the headstone. She looked at Earl. Private Kowalski did not survive his wounds. Master Sergeant Gideon has been visiting this grave every Tuesday for 22 years. She paused. He carried that boy 2 miles. He could not save him. He has been coming back ever since. Somewhere behind Calloway, someone made a sound that was not quite crying and not quite silence, and was somehow both. General Delaney looked at Derek Calloway then, with the full, unhurried weight of her rank and her record, and her understanding of what had just happened in Section G of Arlington National Cemetery. This man, she said, very carefully, will stand at this headstone for as long as he chooses. On any day he chooses. For the rest of his life. Is that understood? Derek Calloway had gone the color of the white marble around him. Yes, ma'am, he said. It was barely a sound. The formal consequences were handled quickly and without ceremony. Calloway was not fired. He was 26 and had made the mistake that 26-year-olds with authority and no wisdom are prone to making, and the institution decided that education served better than termination. He was assigned to mandatory sensitivity and protocol retraining, and his supervisory responsibilities were suspended pending review. He was told, in the formal language of administrative action, that his judgment had been deficient, and that this would be reflected in his record. He was sitting in a folding chair outside the administration building, waiting for his supervisor, when he heard footsteps on the path behind him. Earl Gideon stopped beside him. He still had the wildflowers in his hand. He reached out and placed his palm on Calloway's shoulder, the same shoulder where his own hand had been placed 20 minutes ago, and he held it there for a moment. "You're not a bad man," Earl said. You were doing your job. Doing your job isn't always the same as doing the right thing, but it takes time to learn the difference. You've got time. Calloway looked up at him. His eyes were red. He was trying very hard to hold himself together and not succeeding especially well. I didn't know, he said. I had no idea who, that's the point, Earl said quietly. You weren't supposed to know. Neither was he. He glanced toward the headstone in Section G, visible from here through the rows of white marble. That's the whole point of all of it. Nobody's supposed to know. You do it anyway. He removed his hand. He nodded once, the small formal nod of a man who has said what needed saying and has somewhere else to be. He walked back toward Section G. He still had 20 minutes left. It was the third Tuesday of December when Derek Calloway returned to Arlington. He was not working. He was wearing a civilian jacket and carrying a bunch of chrysanthemums bought from a grocery store, their stems wrapped in a damp paper towel, the way he had learned to do it, watching Earl wrap his wildflowers in October. He found the Kowalski headstone in the third row. He placed the chrysanthemums at its base. He stood there for a moment in the December cold, not knowing what to say, not sure if he was allowed to say anything, not sure if saying anything was the point. He heard footsteps on the frozen grass. Earl Gideon came around the end of the row and stopped when he saw Calloway standing at the stone. He looked at the chrysanthemums. He looked at Calloway. Something moved across his weathered face, not surprise, not judgment, not forgiveness exactly, but something older and quieter than any of those things. He came and stood beside the young man. Neither of them spoke. The wind moved through the rows of white stones, and the flags spoke in their particular language, and the December sky was the pale blue of Earl Gideon's eyes, and the two of them stood together at the grave of a boy who had died at 20 years old on a road in Kung Tri Province. And each of them was doing the thing that humans do when they run out of words, and are left with only the weight of what happened, and the choice to carry it or set it down. Neither of them set it down. That is the thing about the quiet ones, the ones who carry what they carry without making you watch them carry it. The ones who come back, Tuesday after Tuesday, decade after decade, to finish conversations that were interrupted by the worst thing that ever happened to them. They walk among us every day. They stand beside headstones in December cold. They hold wildflowers wrapped in damp paper towels. They look at you with eyes the color of a winter sky, and they absorb whatever you throw at them, and they do not break. And most of us never know their names, and that is exactly how they prefer it. If you were moved by Earl Gideon's story of quiet courage and timeless devotion, hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs to see it, and be sure to subscribe to Veterans Valor for more stories of America's unassuming heroes. Script based on the Veterans Valor Master Framework and title. They removed the old veteran from the cemetery until the honor guard refused to move.